Hello, this is Ms. DB, and in this video we're going to review how to do some of the problems from the Chapter 1, Section 2 assignment, which is on adding and subtracting real numbers. So first of all, we can use a number line to show how to add or subtract real numbers. And we'll do that with integers rather than decimals or fractions to make it a little bit easier. But for addition, if we want to add a positive number, we're going to start with the first number and then move right. If we want to add a negative number, we'll start with the first number and then move left. If we want to subtract a positive number, we start with the original number and then move left. If we want to subtract a negative number, we move right. So it's the opposite of the addition. So let's look at these examples here. We start with -3, so you start by putting a dot at -3, or putting your pen at -3 on the number line, and then we want to add a positive number, which says then to go right. So we start at -3 and then we go 6 units right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we end up at 3. That's our answer. So -3 plus 6 equals 3. And then we can write it out like that. In the second example, we're starting at -2, so you put your cursor or your pen at -2, and then we want to subtract a negative number. So let's see, that's subtraction of a negative number. We're going to move right. So again, we move right because it's subtraction of a negative. So we start at -2, and then we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we end up at 7. So -2 minus a -9 is 7. So in the next problems, you can use the number line that I have here. You don't have to show any work when you're typing your answers in, but you can use it, maybe use your finger on this to help you, or put your pen over it. I'm going to grab a pen tool here. Let's see, where's my drawing? Okay, I have like a pen that's attached to my computer, so I'm going to use that to model some of these problems. So for -2 plus 5, you start at -2, and then it's adding a positive, so I go right. So I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the answer is where you end up. So -2 plus 5 is 3. Let me undo that so I can erase my lines there. In number, let's start with, here, let's do a subtraction one. Number 2 is 5 minus 6. So I always start at the first number. There's 5. And then it says to subtract 6, which is a positive number. To model subtraction of a positive number, move left. So I started at 5, and now I'm going to go left 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So where I end up, that's the answer. So this would be equal to -1. So you can use number lines to help you keep, and those rules up there, to help you find the answers. Now, you don't want to always have to have a number line out, so then we will go over some rules, which is what this part is. First, there's a quick review about what absolute value means. Absolute value of a number is just its distance from 0 on a number line. So the absolute value of 5 is 5 because 5 is 5 units away from 0. The absolute value of -5 is also 5 because that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units away. The absolute value is always positive. You can think about it as distance. If we talk about the distance from one city to another, it doesn't matter if you're talking about Minneapolis to Mankato or Mankato to Minneapolis, it's a positive number. Distance is always positive. So all of these answers will be positive. And it doesn't matter if it's a decimal or a fraction, the absolute value is just the positive of that number. Even if it is positive to start with, it's still going to be positive. Okay, now we're going to get to these rules. This is what you want to memorize so that you don't always have to use a number line or a calculator when you're adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers. So first, let's look at adding. If you are adding numbers with the same sign, the rule is add the absolute values and use the sign of the both numbers because they're both going to be the same. So 3 plus 6, you would add 3 plus 6, and it's 9, and they're both positive, so you get 9. If they're both negative, you would add 2 plus 9. The absolute value of -2 is 2. The absolute value of -9 is 9, and that's 11. and then you take the sign of both of them, which are negative. They're both negative, so it's negative 11. Now, if you have different signs, the rule is you subtract the absolute values and use the sign of the number with the greater absolute value. So for negative 8 and 12, one's negative, one's positive. Subtract, let's see, their absolute value of negative 8 is 8, the absolute value of 12 is 12. Subtract these, take the bigger number minus the smaller number, you get 4, and it's positive 4 because the 12 has the bigger absolute value and it's a positive number. For the next problem, 3 plus negative 15, the absolute values would be 3 and 15. Whoa. And we'll subtract 3 and 15, and that's 12. And this time it's going to be negative 12 because the larger absolute value is 15, and that had a negative in front of it. So negative 12 would be our answer for this example. All right, let's look at a couple examples. Number 12 has decimals in it, but that's okay. We have 0.25 plus negative 0.5. Well, these are different signs. So the rule is to subtract, the bigger one is 0.5 minus 0.25. And when we subtract decimals, I'm going to add a 0 here. We can't take 5 away from 0, so we change this to 10 and then change this to 4. And we can take 5 away from 10 and get 5. And I don't know why it keeps jumping on me here. We can take 2 from 4 and get 2, and then we bring our decimal point straight down, and it's 0.25. We subtracted the absolute values. The next thing that we need to do is look at the sign, and our answer will be the sign of the one that has the larger absolute value, which is the 0.5. So negative 0.25 is our answer for number 12. All right, let's look at subtraction. When we are going to subtract real numbers, we have to do something about the inverses. Two numbers are opposite if their sum is 0. A number and its opposite are additive inverses. That's just a vocabulary word. They're called additive inverses, and they're the same distance from 0. They have the same absolute value, like 6 and negative 6. They're inverses of each other, additive inverses of each other. So if we have to subtract, we're going to use that vocabulary word in our rule for subtraction. To subtract a number, add its opposite. And the opposite is, there it goes again. It just likes to change pages on me. Is its additive inverse. That's the opposite. I'm going to... Okay, I'll stop using my pen for a minute and see if that helps. So here we have to use the rules to subtract. We have 10 minus 23. Well, the rule says that we should add the opposite. So what you're going to do is write down the first number exactly the same as it was, 10. Now we change our subtracting to adding. We change 23 to the opposite, which is negative 23. Now we're going to use our rules for adding that we learned earlier. Our rule for adding, if they have different signs, is you subtract their absolute values. So the absolute value of 10 is 10. The absolute value of negative 23 is a positive 23. I subtract those and I'll get 13. Now the rule also says that you want to take the sign of the larger one. And the one that had the larger absolute value was the negative 23. So my answer for this is going to be negative 13. Not positive 13, but negative, because the negative 23 had the larger absolute value. All right, let's look at number 16 as well. Number 16 says negative 38. I keep the first one. The first number always stays the same. Don't change the sign or anything. Then the minus sign changes to a plus sign, because we're going to change our subtraction to adding the opposite. Well, the opposite of 20.5 is negative 20.5. Now I have a negative 38 plus negative 20.5. Now I use my rules for adding. If they have the same sign, you add them together and take the sign of both. Well, I know my answer is going to be negative because they're both negative. Now I just have to add 38 and 20.5, which would be 58.5. And that's it. You're done. Now in 17, it's fractions, but that's okay. Fractions are just numbers like any other number. We keep this first one the same, just like always. And then we change the subtracting to adding. The opposite would be the opposite of 3/4 would be negative 3/4. They're not all, whoops, I got too many 4s in there. They're not always going to be negative. Let's see. It's only in these examples I have all of them being that way, I guess. Oh, are they all? Yeah, I have all of them. If I was subtracting a negative number, then I would actually add a positive, but I guess I didn't have any examples of those in the worksheet. So we have negative 1/4 plus negative 3/4, and again, those are the same sign, so you'll go ahead and add them together. And negative 1/4 plus negative 3/4 is negative 4/4, but negative 4/4 simplifies to negative 1. And the reason it's negative is because both of them were negative. And then you'll continue on and do a couple problems, 18 and 19. Number 18, you're going to explain inverse operations or inverses like up here. And then in number 19, you can use this picture to help you figure out what the temperature is going to be after it rises and falls several times. All right, let me know if you have any questions on the worksheet as you work your way through it. Don't forget to save it when you're done and then to attach it to your assignment. Thank you very much. Have a